Yo, what up, dogs? It's Chris checking in with you today from the Unrelenting Brush for this wonderful tutorial on how I paint Angron in between 6 to 8 hours. This is a great baseline video for you to get the basic techniques done, most of the base coating, some of the additional details. From here you can extend the highlights, you can push a few more further details, but to get an Angron done for the table quick time, this video is hopefully going to be everything you need to get your big angry red boy sorted. So without further ado, we'll crack the flip on. So as always, I start off with a black prime using Colourforge's Matte Black. This is the perfect primer for the price and the size that you need to get Angron sprayed up. It's my go-to choice of primer, and 99.9% of all my projects start this way. So I made sure there was good coverage all over him, side to side, ups, downs, get every ounce of this boy sprayed black. I'm going to be using my Galeri Advanced GAD 68 airbrush, which they kindly sent over to me to review. Thank you very much, this brush is fantastic. And I'm going to start off with some Necro Gold from Scale Alchemy. Now during this video we're going to talk about processes, steps, what works, what is the best way to approach something, the steps to take to get there. With metallics, if you're airbrushing, always start with the metallics first before you paint anything else. If you're airbrushing, metallic paints will fling pigments all over the place. There'll be metallic particulates all over by the end of it. If you start doing this once you've done your other non-metallic base coats, it is going to absolutely wreck all your work. So I recommend doing any metallic airbrushing from the get-go, straight off, and get it done and dusted. It doesn't mean you've got to clean your airbrush down thoroughly, but that's the price we pay to get some really nice shiny metallics. This colour is fantastic. It's one of my favourites from Scale Colour. It's a really nice kind of dark, dull, cold gold. It's perfect for Angron's armour. If you don't have an airbrush, you can use rattle cans. Something like the brass one from Colourforge would be fantastic. Any alternative that you prefer would be great. The reason we're doing this one first, not just because of airbrushing, but because it's going to be a lot easier for us to do the red details following this and then tidy up the gold than it would be if we did the red details to then go in with the gold. The gold's in all the hard to reach places, between the wings, in between the legs, around all those nice details. So it makes much more sense for us to be messy with this step now, go in and do the red bits and then tidy up the metallic around the red. You'll understand what I mean as we go on through the video. But yeah, we want to apply a couple of coats of this all over the armour. I'm dropping stuff all over the armour. We want to get every bit of panel covered. If we get some where we don't want it, that's fine, we're going to tidy that up anyway. But do a couple of thin layers of this, do a couple of passes, and you'll get a really nice, beautifully built up, shiny metallic from this colour. That is this perfect kind of dulled, dark, brassy gold colour that we'd want for Angron's armour. You want this to be a really nice, cold, contrasting colour against his fiery red skin and his angry face, and I feel this gold's perfect for that. If you don't have this gold, something like Rune Lord Brass is fine from Citadel. You could always use light bronze from Pro Acryl. Ultimately, guys, whichever one you want to use is entirely up to you. This is my 6th Angron, and I think I've used this paint for 2 of them. So there you go, that's how it looks. It's an absolutely wonderful colour and it airbrushes brilliantly, and you can see just how reflective that metallic is. We absolutely adore that. Up next, we're going in with some burgundy. We're going to make a start on Angron's skin. So basically, all the fleshy areas we're going to airbrush with this colour. We're going to try our best to keep it off the gold. If we get it on the gold, we're not going to stress, because all we're going to do is go in with a brush later and base coat the areas that we need to tidy up. This burgundy is a really nice initial base layer to give us that transition from the burgundy colour to a nice fiery red. So we start with this. We want to get this in all the details that are fleshy and are going to be bright red. So we want to also try and zenithal this where possible. We want to keep some of that black as the shadow and let the burgundy be our initial colour to be the jump up from that. Pro Acryl paints airbrush fantastically. I think I thinned this with a tiny couple of drops of flow improver just to keep it from drying on the tip of the airbrush. But yeah, we're going to try and be as delicate as we can with this to keep it off the gold. But again, if we get it on the gold, no stress. We've got our Necro Gold at hand to go over where we need to. Again, all the fleshy areas, his face, his wings, in between the membranes, all the bits we want to be red, we want to hit with this burgundy. And this is what we look like. We've got a slightly messy gold, but we're going to tidy that up shortly, and our initial burgundy down really, really messily. Some initial shadows are kept, but this is a great start to go from there. Up next, we've got bold Pyrrole Red, another lovely colour from Pro Acryl. Exactly the same before, a couple of drops of flow improver just to help it spit through the airbrush that little bit nicer. And we're just going to use this to start doing some little highlights. So areas like his knuckles, especially around his face. The face is where we want all those brighter details. We want this to be where the eye is drawn to. We want it to look like the fires of hell itself are being invoked through this emotion. So we want to retain our brightest, fiercest reds for there. We're also going to use this on some of the muscles around his arm, so like those big bulging biceps. Any areas where we think we want the red to be that little bit of a step up, we're going to apply this to it. Now there's quite a stark jump between this and the burgundy before, but that's what we want. We want this really nice sudden jump to this really bold, fiery red. That is the epitome of Angron. He is a giant bloodthirster. He's a big, angry red boy. So if we can translate that into the jump up of his flesh from a burgundy to a bright red, we absolutely should. From here, if you wanted to push all the skin a little bit more, you could do some highlights with a little bit of orange. You can mix some of Pro Acryl's orange into Bold Pyro red and apply a few highlights, but we're going to do this to his face in a bit. And here we are, we've got orange red from Pro Acryl. This is a lovely, lovely colour. And we're going to be very selective with this and where we apply it. So I'm going to apply it to his face. Again, I want his face to be that absolute pinnacle of this model. I want it to be where most of the detail is spent. So I'm going to push the colour on the red there on his face. We're also going to do a little bit on his knuckles, maybe a little bit on the apex tips of the wings, on the corners, on those the claw-like bits at the end of his wings. This is going to be our apex airbrush colour for the red. And then from there again, you could up the highlight with some orange. You could apply some edge highlights and some point highlights, just to up it just that little bit. We're focusing on speed for this Angron, so I'm just going to use this airbrushing of orange red to up the red areas just a little bit where I think it needs it. Again, just a couple of drops of flow improver to stop it drying in the tip of the airbrush, and we're away. So here we go, that is the base layers of our red done, and that's about 60% of this model finished. What we're going to do now is we're going to go in and tidy up that armour. So I've just got a big old scatty brush, I've got my Necro Gold, you can see up in the top there, and we're just going to tidy up the brass and bronze areas where we've got some of that red. So we want to be careful and keep this away from the red as best as possible. If you do get it on the red where we've airbrushed, the best way you can do it is try and achieve a mid-tone, so your Bold Pyro red just to tidy it up. Alternatively, I always find if you're tidying up airbrushing, go in with a dark colour. It's a safer option. Chances are you've got the paint somewhere where it meets another point, so in between the flesh and the armour. A darker red means it's going to give the presence of shadow a bit more. So either go for a mid-tone or a dark tone, so in this case it would be burgundy or Bold Pyro red. So what we're going to do now is tidy up our armour areas with a brush and get our brass armour back to Necro Gold where we've got red all over it. Again, it pays to be neat here, and then from here we'll go on to some of those finer details. So this paintbrush is on fine, you just need to mix it with a little bit of water to reduce the thickness of it. The colours from scale are good for metallics. I have moved on to other metallic colours like Dark Star and Pro Acryl and stuff like that. But the metallic pigment in these is absolutely excellent. It's not quite as bright and luminous as Dark Star, but still very, very good. I do recommend you try some. They're Black Metal and their Necro Gold are probably two of my favourites. Dark Neutral Grey. We're going to start going in onto some of those details like his terrages, the cloth, some of the fabrics, the straps. So all we're going to do is use this on that there. So this is on the cloth that's around his leg. There's not many bits. I think there's 2 or 3 bits of this around his waist. And we're just going to base coat those with this colour. The brushes I'm using in this video for 9 out of 10 of this job are orange brushes. Check out orangebrushes.com. They're a superb product. Great quality brushes that take an absolute hammering. I use mine daily and they're extremely reasonably priced. Orangebrushes.com. Coal Black from Pro Acryl, one of the goats. We're going to use this to paint all the claws and the hoofs of Angron. So the claws on his fingers, all the jutty out spikes on his tail, the claws of his wings. Basically anything that's jutting out of his skin is going to be painted in this colour. It's a wonderful paint. It's a fantastic matte finish. It airbrushes wonderful. It's probably one of the paints I use daily. If you've not got yourself some Pro Acryl Coal Black, treat yourself on your next order. It is absolutely wonderful. So this is probably one of the base coating areas that takes the longest, just because there are so many claws and spikes and jutty outy bits that we need to pay attention to. So it takes credence to take time with this. Give the model a once over, flip it around, flip it upside down, make sure you've got the underside of all those claws, make sure you've not missed anything, just for the purposes of getting stuff done in time. If you don't have Pro Acryls Coal Black, you've got probably Abaddon Black from Citadel or Corvus Black. Both of those are fine, they're both great paints. The reason I steer clear of Citadel base layers these days is because they've got quite a satiny, glossy finish. I don't really want that for the stuff I'm painting 9 times out of 10. You can adjust the finish with varnishing and stuff like that, but I always say the less paints we use and the less paints we apply, the better the finish of the model. So because of that, Pro Acryls finish is fantastic. The quantity and the quality of the paint you get in the bottles is great for the price. My only critique of Pro Acryl are the bottles. They're dropper bottles with twisty tops. On a hot day, pressure builds up, and when you open them, they spurt. But I'm a messy bastard, so I don't care too much. If you've not tried Pro Acryl, get yourself a black, a brown, some of your favourite colours to use, and take it for a spin. We've now got some blue black. We're going to use this on the Terriers and some of the other fabrics on Angron. We're keeping the colour palette limited, again, using as few and as little paints as possible. We're going to focus our areas on the important bits of the model, and I'll explain more about my process on painting a model like this as we go. But yeah, we're just going to apply this to the Terriers, around his shoulders, between his legs, all those nice gladiatorial combat-esque leather straps that dangle down with studs all over them. Again, if you're looking for Citadel equivalents, this would probably be something like Cantor Blue or Night Lord's Blue, somewhere around that region you can play around with. But again, you can swap out any of these colours for any brand or any colour that you want. I just find with Angron, you want the focus on the main parts of the model, which is, for this case, his face and his skin, the armour. Those are going to be the brightest focal points around the weapons. And then for straps, details, leather, bits like that, you don't need to suck eggs or fuck spiders. Just get some nice dark colours on there to contrast the bits that we are going to be focusing our time on. So yeah, we're thinning this down just a little bit of water and then tidying up all those details. Don't forget the straps that are attaching the armour to himself. That's pretty much most of the base layers down that aren't metallic after this. Dark Warm Grey from Pro Acryl. We're going to use this on the tufty bits of hair he's got on his body. So he's got them on his arms, on his legs, in his armpits. They're dotted about a few places on the model. Again, it pays attention to take a little bit of time and find out where those are. Get those base coated with this colour. No rocket science. Get it done, and then we're going to pick these out a little bit more later on. So at the painting workshops I run, I mentioned my processes. I mentioned the Unrelenting 3. The Unrelenting 3R uses as few paints and as little paint as possible, which we've already discussed. Pick 3 focal points on the model, so 3 areas on a model that you want to dedicate most of your time and attention to. And number 3, what can I be painting now while this is drying? So to run those down, use as few paints and as little paints as possible, fairly common sense. There's no sense on painting an orange using 4 or 5 different paints if we can just do it in 2 or 3. Pick the 3 focal points on the model where you want to dedicate most of your time. For Angron, it's his armour, his face, and his weapons. And then, what can I be painting now while this is drying? It's fairly common sense. So, while bits are drying on the Terriers, we're now moving on to the hair. While that's drying, move on to the next bit. It's less sitting about and waiting for stuff to do when we could be cracking on. So, Coal Black, this is going back into the wing membranes. Now, this is a job for a big messy brush. I've got one of my old Citadel artificial bristle shade brushes. It's a long, thin, narrow brush. Great for going into those little corners without trying to get it all over those red bony bits. So we're just going to go in, membranes front and back, and hit those with this. I've seen a lot of people do Angron in sub-assemblies. They sometimes leave the wings off, which is absolutely fine if that's what you want to do. Again, this is my 6th Angron. I've painted all of them fully assembled, and I've never had much of an issue with getting into the bits between the wings. Once we've base coated these in coal black, from here, there's a few ways you can go about making it a little bit nicer. You can go in with an airbrush and carefully tart it up with a slightly brighter colour. Something like blue black from Pro Acryl would be great. You can apply some little sketchy edge highlights vertically going down towards the ground along the membranes inside and out with the same colour again, just to tart it up a little bit, maybe up it 1 to increase the sharpness of the highlight. Or you can just whack a dry brush on there and again go for a blue black, go for a slightly dark grey, and just give it a little dry brush just to pick out those kind of membrane-esque details. Whatever you want to do. My preferred way of doing it is give it a little tot up with the airbrush and then a few line highlights down as we go. This is completely optional. I've done it on some Angrons, I've not done it on other Angrons. It's entirely up to you and what you want to do. I think for this one I wanted to make sure I got the skin popping nice and bright looking absolutely wicked, and that will come across once you see the finished result. Blue-black from Primarch, once again, we are back with it. And this is what I was talking about earlier. We're going to use this to just infill those wings a little bit. We want to keep it away from the red, bony details, and just really, really gently tickle those up a little bit with this. So you can see as the wet paint hits, it starts to dry immediately where the position of it's going. You develop this kind of hand-eye coordination with airbrushing. The more you use it, you'll know where to point it and where the paint will go. It's not always perfect. It's not a precise art. It will never replace your hand brushes, but it's good for situations like this where I just want to tot something up just that little bit without spending too much time on it. If you're interested in airbrushing, there is an article on my website. If you Google Unrelenting Brush Airbrush Crash Course, you'll see it on there. It's a 2-part article, and it recommends there the beginnings of airbrushing, the route I'd take. Some people drop an absolute fortune on it and get started, and then they break their airbrush or it clogs and they get upset and they don't want to do it anymore because they spent a load of money and can't use it. I will always say start as cheap as possible. I like these Galeri airbrushes. I've got 2. Their price point is excellent. I think they're about £30 or £40 on Amazon. So if you're looking to start out, get a dirt cheap compressor and one of those airbrushes and get started. Alternatively, I started out by buying a compressor kit on eBay or on Amazon or something like that that came with a couple of cheap Chinese airbrushes. That was amazing. I think all in I spent about £80 on getting started with the compressor, the airbrushes, some airbrush cleaner, some thinner and stuff like that, and I just thinned the Citadel paints I had. From there, you can take it for a spin. If you lose it, 80 quid is about the cost of 2 boxes of models these days, which is frightening to think about. No love lost, sell the bits, make a bit of money back. It's not for you, you've learned that. If it does work out, start cheap, eventually invest in slightly better materials, some new airbrush paints, a new airbrush, and go from there. If you ever want any advice, guys, drop me a message on Facebook or Instagram. I'm happy to help. Neutral grey from Pro-Acryl. Honestly, the adoration I have for bloody Pro-Acryl. We're going to start using this on highlighting... No, we're going to use this to paint the pipes. So there's a few pipes around Angron. It's one of the reasons why I don't like sub-assembling in, because I feel like if those don't line up when you get to the final assembly, it's a load of work for nothing. So that's why I'd rather have a fully built model instead of sub-assemblies. A, because I get a better idea of the finished product as I'm painting, and B, if I lose a sub-assembly or something doesn't assemble right after I've painted it, I'm going to be absolutely fucking livid. So again, we're just using this to base coat all the pipe areas. They're normally in between his wings. There's a few jutting out of his armour, going into his arms and stuff. You'll find them about the place. Just whack some of this on there. Easy peasy squeezy lemons Jill. In case you don't know, guys, I do have a Patreon. It's full of supporters. I absolutely love and adore each and every one of them. For just £3 a month, you get entered into a monthly giveaway to win a Combat Patrol / Spearhead box / voucher equivalent, so about 80-90 quid. You also get access to a hobby clinic where loads of us share hobby advice and back and forth and have a great time and have a nice little painting community with loads of updates every other day. And then from there, we've also got loads of tutorials and videos on how to paint various things. Do please check it out. Patreon.com/theunrelentingbrush. Bright Warm Grey. Absolutely love this paint. It is fantastic-ish. Let me remember what I did this for. I think it's his teeth. No, it's the skulls. This is a fantastic base paint for skulls. Fuck going in with Xandri Dust or a bone colour or a white or a pure white. This is a really nice alternative that is not just excellent to paint on, it goes on in a couple of layers and is nice and flat and opaque. It also shades really, really nicely so that we can get skulls done in no time whatsoever. Obviously, this dude is swimming in skulls. It's kind of his thing. So if we can get those painted up quick time with minimal base layers and a shade, that's absolutely what we're going to do. So take your time, go around all the skulls. I think I missed the ones on his wings in this pass, so I go over those later and pick those out. But yeah, he's got them on his trophy rack, around his neck, hanging off his armour. Take your time, go in, try and be neat. But yeah, a couple of nice couple of nice thin layers of this trunkily applied without worrying about being neat around the chains and stuff. Just get them on there and get them done. Here's a bit of unrelenting lore for you. Fucking hate painting skulls. Can't stand it. Never liked it. Massive fan of Khorne and all things Bloodguard. Can't stand painting skulls. What a cruel life this is. Brill, we're going in with some black wash. Now, if you are used to the Citadel washes, your Agrat Surshade and your Dawn oils, they're fine. They changed the formula a year or two back that made them really glossy, and it made me very, very sad because I fucking love those paints. I've since switched to Pro-Acryl's black wash and brown wash, and do you know what? Try them, you'll never go back. If you have to buy 2 paints off the back of this video, make them black wash and brown wash, and take them for a spin. I guarantee you'll be impressed. So we're going to apply the black wash pretty much over all the details that we've base coated that aren't the flesh and the armour, or the membranes. We're going to go over the skulls, the cloth, the terrages, the friggin' cables and pipes, straps on the weapons and stuff. Go in with that black wash and apply it. Make sure everything's dry first before you do, and then give it plenty of time to dry. It's particularly nice on the skulls. It gives them that really nice kind of semi-darkened, semi-dirty shaded effect, without the skulls being then like a pearlescent bright white. I just think it's perfect. I know some people have recommended the Tooth-in Coats alternative, Obsidian Wash I think it's called. I've used them, they're fine, they're nice, but I do prefer the Pro Acryls. That's just how I am. But yeah, do take them for a spin. They are absolutely wicked. From there, we're back to neutral grey, and we're going to use this to highlight some of those grey details. We're going to apply some quite chunky grey highlights to the turrets, and just up those just a little bit. Excuse me. Now, normally I don't bother highlighting things like leather straps and terrages and all those fucking stupid little bits we have on models. Again, thinking about the Unrelenting 3, what 3 areas of the model are we going to dedicate most of our time and effort to? Anything outside of that, keep it to a base layer, a wash, and maybe a highlight if you've got the time, if you want to push yourself, if you want to put that effort in. But otherwise, I would reserve that time, effort, and paint for the important areas of the model. Because it's Angron, because this is something I'm painting for a client, I want to increase that detail and up it just a little bit, and it pays to add these little details. It doesn't take that long. And I've done, again, this is number 6 now, so I can paint, I think I've painted more Angrons than I have any other character in Warhammer 40,000 outside of your Space Marines, Berserkers, Cultists, so on and so forth. So again, we're just going to lightly go in with the edge of our brush, using our orange brushes just to tickle the sides of those, and just up them just that little bit. Don't forget all those terrages around his arms, in between his legs, the ones at the back of his arms. Go in and give them a little tickle with the side of your brush. Dark blue grey, an interesting colour from Pro Acryl. Lovely, fantastic, love it. And we're going to use this to highlight the cloth in between his belt line and his legs. So, very little amount of this to do. We're just going to tickle the edges of those. If there's any like little bullet holes or holes in the fabric, we're just going to highlight the edges of those as well. Quite hard to see on camera because there's great whopping swords in the way. So go in and highlight those as best you can. That little bit of blue is nice because again it contrasts the red and the coldness of the gold. So just this little hint of blue I think is going to really do a lot for this model, and make it stand out on the battlefield, stand out in the client's collection, as him being the be all and end all big daddy of rage, destruction and absolute tantrum mania. Warm grey, once again one of my favourite colours from Pro Acryl. That's been said 3 or 4 times in this video already. This is an arduous one. We are going to edge highlight every single claw, talon, spike jutting out of Angron. It's not a fun job, but it's got to be done, and it does make a nice difference. It just adds that really nice sharp line to those details and makes them look a lot more jutting and menacing. Once again, the side of your brush, as little paint on your brush as possible. We're just going to tickle the edges, the sharpest point to those. Eventually, you'll get it into a point where you can nail most of those in one stroke, so all around his tail, you can just go ba 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 in one smooth pass, and just hit those with this colour and just make them really nice and sharp. Alternatives to this are Dawnstone, great paint from Citadel, but again, use whatever colours you want to do. If you want to have a pink and yellow Mr. Blobby style Angron, you crack on Sunshine and have a bloody lovely time doing it. At this stage, we are absolutely smashing through this Angron. We're probably about 78% of the way there. It's all those little details that are going to make the big difference. So things like this step where we're making those spikes seem a lot sharper through paintwork. We're going to dedicate some time to his face soon. And then it's things like the weapon details and the glowy details that won't take long to do at all. Right, from here, we are moving on to the teeth. Going back to our bright warm grey from earlier, we're just going to, in downward strokes in the direction of the teeth, start applying our base layers and just get that initial colour on there. Bright warm grey is great for this because, again, we don't want pearlescent white Colgate Teggers. You could go down the path of yellowy stained devil-like teeth, but again, we don't want to lose that in the armour and the redness of the face. So a nice in-between of a warmish off-white I think is fantastic. So very gently in both directions, tickling those teeth with that colour. Tan flesh, we're going to go in and paint his tongue with this bad boy, just give it a little... So we probably should have done this first before base coating the teeth, but you know what? Don't worry, it'll be right. So just gently in between his tigers, give this a little tickle, just to give it that more of a offset colour to make it look like a tongue. Gives a kiss. Orange and orange red, we're going to start upping some of those details on his face. So I've mixed those together on the palette 1-to-1, and we're just going to go in, picking out some of those sharper details, his brow, the sharp lines down his cheek, his chin, his nose, anything around his eyes that are going to draw our attention there. You can then up the orange and gradually increase that and do kind of a blended effect to make the center of his face, around his mouth, around his eyes, more bright, more orange, more fiery. This is a fantastic face, I feel, to start learning how to paint faces on, because the amount of details and this crispness and the sharpness of the lines, while also incorporating fiery colours of burgundies to reds to oranges, I feel really helps you understand the lighting effects that you want to achieve. And again, that absolute incandescent rage expression on his face. So take it for a spin. We want to again try and keep the brightest, fieriest points to the center of his face, where we want the eye drawn, where we want people's focus to be. So anything around his eyes and around his mouth is what we want. I'm making a point of ensuring that the most orange is used on his face and not anywhere else in the model, because again, this is the most important part of this model, is his face. So try and incorporate that and think about that while you're painting, to keep your focal point where you want it to be, by ensuring you keep the X paint and amount of paint where you want that to be. Grr, I'm evil, I'm evil. Bold titanium white, another fantastic colour from Proacryl. If you need any white in your life, this is the one. We're going to use this to edge highlight just the very tips of his teggers. If you need to add any shading, you could drop some black wash in there. Let's say we went a bit mad with our warm grey and lost a lot of the depth between the teeth. A little bit of black wash in there is going to undo that. And then you can just use this to pick out the very, very tippy, pointy bits of his teeth. And then we're also going to dot his eyeballs with this as well. Imperial Fist Contrast, lovely, lovely colour. Great for fiery eyes. We're just going to drop a little bit of that into there, into his eyeballs, just to get that nice fiery orangey yellow effect. Boom, done, fantastic. 10 out of 10, we'll eyeball again. So here's where we are at the minute. He's looking good. And again, we're just going to go in with this bold titanium white just to dot the edges of his teeth. Just add that little bit of crisp sharpness. And again, keep that focal point around his face. This is good practice. It's good for brush control. Go in with the thinnest, pointiest brush you've got. And again, just little tickles. Painting downward strokes is a lot easier than doing anything else, especially on vertical surfaces like those. Berserker Bloodshade, we're going to use this to just recess shade some of that face. So we don't want it to look like some amorphous, smooth, blended red-orange blob. We want a little bit of definition in there. So we're going to apply this in the crevices around his nose, around his brow, around his cheeks, where you've got those lovely clean lines around his mouth. And this is just going to push that definition, and again, add more interest, and make his face appear more creased and aggressive and fantastic. This shade's good. I like the Citadel shades, but again, they do have a slight satin finish. I think we're using such a thin amount of this when we thinned it with a little bit of water where we can get away with it. But if you do get a glossy finish from a wash in a situation like this, go in with the smallest amount of matte varnish you can possibly do just to tie it down. Boom, we're about halfway through this video, and once this is done, that is all our non-metallic areas completed. Now we go into the metallic base coating. So there's a reason we do it in this manner. I do it normally because I do my non-metallic surfaces first, matte varnish everything once they're done, then do my metallics, so we get a clear definition and break between what's metallic and what isn't. It helps differentiate textures, and for me it's the result I absolutely love. Obviously, because of Angron's armour, we can't do that. If we put a matte varnish over that armour, it's going to lose all that metallic sparkle and upset me tremendously, because that's what I love about this paint. So for the purposes of this, we're now going to go in with our base coating by brush for metallics. Dark Silver from Proacryl, again, another fantastic paint. It's better than Lead Belcher. It's almost as good as Iron Warriors. If you do get a metallic, get Dark Silver. I find it's a really nice base coat for most metals. I cheat with a lot of metals. I'll do Dark Silver. I'll give it a wash, a brown wash or black wash. And then from there, I'll probably just dry brush it with a bright silver. You can spend as much time as you want going into that and, you know, individually edge highlighting metallic surfaces. I just cop out because I've got things to do. I think the effect is fine regardless, especially a model this size where the silver details are quite minimal. Chains and edges of weapons is pretty much where it's going to be, so you don't need to stress too much about the amount of time you spend edge highlighting individual metallic surfaces. So again, we're just going to go in with a base coat of dark silver and paint all these bits we need to do. The chains, the spikes in the under, the terrages and the fetishes, weapon details, and I think that's it. Oh, the nails! God, can't forget that. The nails on his Swede. Then we get to get them painted as well. Now, according to the recording on my phone, this whole process took about 10 minutes, which is probably one of the longest elements of painting Angron that we've covered so far. So that gives you an idea of where we are with this model. Once we've base coated the silver, we're about 3/4 of the way through the video. It's just a really nice process in how I break down painting. This is how I paint a lot of large models, so I break it down into processes of the 3 main bits of the model I want to spend time on, the 2 main areas for Angron being his skin and his armour, and then the detail going on his face. So it gives you a really nice idea on how to approach those big models. I would do exactly the same step here as I do for Lord of Skulls, Imperial Knights, big dragons for Age of Sigmar. Pick the 2 main colours, focus on those first, and then do the details around that. Airbrushing helps. You can easily get by with just using spray cans and rattle cans with Zenithals and bits like that. It's a lot of forward planning to think how I can approach painting this model in as few steps as possible with as few paints as possible, but once you get the knack of it, it's a great way to up your hobby, but also ensure that you get the good results for those big models if you've got limited painting time, which I know a lot of you guys do. I've cracked Angron off his base because I super glued him down there so I could paint the base separately with him off it, just to make life that little bit easier. I'm now going in and dry brushing the skulls with some of that bright warm grey. So bright warm grey for a base layer, washed black wash, and now it's dry. I'm going to just give them a little tick with a bright warm grey to bring them back up again. I probably should have done this before I did the dark silver, just because I'm probably going to get it on there and need to tidy it up. But lessons were learned. I'm painting this while filming, which is always a pain in the arse, but learn from my mistakes, guys. If you ever want any advice for painting, drop me a message on my social medias. Unrelenting Brush at Facebook. Instagram is _unrelenting_brush. Hobby advice is free. Patreon support's appreciated, but I'm not a dick. I'm not going to have you message me and then be like, oh, you got to give me some money first. If I can help, I absolutely will. Renaissance Gold from Darkstar. I mentioned Darkstar earlier. These paints are unbelievable. They're very, very thin. For base coating with a brush, I try and steer clear because of just how thin they are and how many layers you need to apply to get a solid opaque finish. However, for highlighting and dry brushing and finishing, they are wonderful. They are so luminous and the metallic pigment in them is so strong. It's fantastic for bright metallic details. If you want to go for something parade ready or something just that little bit brighter, take Darkstar for a spin. I know I'm selling you a lot of paints in this video and we're all very tight for cash at the minute, but I'll do a roundup at the end of paints I think you should definitely get at the end of this video. So what we're doing is using a dry brush and dry brushing this over the metallic details of the armour. We'll try and keep it off the red and bits like that, but there's nothing we can't tidy up at the end. When it comes to tidying up, I've always found, and I learned this from a good friend of mine, who, as he makes a mistake, he tidies it up. So base layers, oh no, I made a mistake, tidy it up. Shading, oh, I've made a mistake, tidy up. Highlighting, oh, I've made a mistake, tidy up. He spent as much time tidying up models from painting areas as he does painting and finishing a model. Wait till you get to the end of the project, then start tidying up, and don't let those little niggles that are barely in sight worry you too much. Tidy up as best you can, obviously, but do it all at the end, because otherwise you spend more time painting errors through the process as you do enjoying the process of getting a model finished and then tidying up at the very end. That's how I do it. If you've got a preferred way of doing it, leave a comment, I'd love to hear it. But yeah, we always called it the pidge painting phase, where you'd spend as much time tidying up errors as you would painting the whole model. But hey, whose hobby is it? Yours, not mine. Light Silver from Amamig. These dry brush paints are cool. I do need to get some more, and we're just going to use this to tickle up areas that need to be that little bit brighter. So we're going to do it on the silver areas and the armour. So we're going to start with the sword. I don't want to go too heavy on this. I want to keep it to be that dark iron and the lore that it was an iron bar that beat a Slaneshi demon to fucking death and got imbued with the soul of it and other fantastic writing. So we're going to stipple and just hit the edges with this because we want the edges to be the sharpest bit while maintaining that dark metallic base layer. You can go as heavy as you want with this. I probably went just a little bit too heavy, but we're going to come back in later and do some flamey effects on there anyway, so I'm not going to stress too much about it. But this is one of my favourite paints of metallics. This is, again, I mentioned earlier, base layer with dark silver, shade with a dark wash, and then just dry brush it with this, and that's how I do most of my silver metallics. Bolt guns on Space Marines, friggin' weapons for Oryx in Age of Sigmar. It's just a really nice quick approach, and you can dedicate more time to it if you want, or like me, if you've got shit to do, if you've got 100 models to paint in a week, this is a great way to go around getting them done quickly while still looking decent. So again, we're going to make sure we don't have too much paint on a brush and just tickle those areas. This is going to act as our silver highlight for our brass and gold areas as well. Just trying to make sure we keep it off the red and the areas we don't want any silver paint. We're also going to hit our butcher's nails. We're going to hit the spiky bits at the end of our terrages. Any chains and bits we can get to. Again, just trying to be careful with this. I'm going to tickle the edges of our brass armor just to add that final sharp silver highlight to make it look sinister and sharp and bright and sparkly and wonderful and fantastic. But you can see by now how much Angron's coming together and how little time it's taken, and how talking through the easy steps of doing it makes it a far easier project to approach. This is Thrash Metal from Metal Alchemy from Scale Colour. As you can see, the paint exploded onto my palette and wasted a load, bastards. And we're just going to do this on the kind of plugs and the tubes inside his skin. So he's got them around the arms of his wings. So just those little kind of tubes and piping, and those little, they're almost like ports for the black carapace, which I don't know if Primarchs wear black carapaces, to be honest with you. Leave a comment if you know, you fucking nerd. And then we're going to use this just to punch those colours up a little bit. They're little details that will do a lot for the model if we just go in with a nice bright silver and just give them just that little tickle. Try and keep it off the red if you can, but yeah, it's a really nice little finishing detail that doesn't take long at all. He's got them on either side of his wings, around his legs and his arms. Just give them a little dot of this Thrash Metal silver. If you've not got that, Iron Breaker or Iron Hand Steel or something like that, you'll be fine. Now, I know I've spoken a lot about several different paint brands here, and again, I appreciate times are tough and people want to stick with one brand or what they have. Let me know what your favourite paint brands are. Recommend something you've not seen in this video. I will absolutely check it out if I can. At the end of the day, guys, we use these materials every day, if not every other day. So shared knowledge and best practice is fantastic for all of us. We've got some Bolt Titanium White, and I'm just going to go in onto the skulls on his sword and get those base coated. It's going to take a couple of layers, but this is just going to set up our initial layers for our flamey, contrasty goodness. And then we're going to go in and get that looking hot, hot Vindaloo. Hit both sides of it, don't forget that, and then give it plenty of time to dry. Go in thin with this, let it dry, go in with another thin layer, let it dry. Because if you start hitting this with contrast while it's still wet, it's going to look fucking terrible. I put some Liquitex white ink into my airbrush. You could equally use Bolt Titanium White thinned down a lot, and we're just going to hit the edges of this with our airbrush to give that nice gradient so that when our contrast hits it, it looks a little bit more OSL-y, a little bit more flamey and glowy. It's just a really nice quick way to go about it. So paint in the base layer first to build up that strong colour, and then hit the edges of it with an airbrush with a white ink or a white acrylic. If you go mad like I did there, just wipe it away with your thumb dead quick and go from there. Less is definitely more. Go from further away, do light little passes, don't fucking drown it in the paint. And yeah, we want to have this so that we don't have it looking like it's detached from the metallic elements of it, but we also want to have it where it's drawing the iron, looking nice and hot on the centre of the main haft of the blade. Back with our Imperial Fist Yellow. Now, this is the only thing I would probably change about the way I painted this Angron. I think Imperial Fist Yellow is just that little bit too cold. I should have done something like Iyanden Yellow or Nuclear Sunrise from Army Painter. Yeah, this yellow is just a little bit too cold and not really what we should be using to give a flame effect. That's my bad, but we bring it back in a bit. But for the purposes of you guys, maybe going with something a little bit more of a warm yellow, something a bit fiery. I think I just had Imperial Fist contrast at hand and grabbed that. I have since found my Iyanden Yellow and cursed myself to the ends of the earth. There we go, nice and easy. We're going to go in and do some extra funky stuff there in a bit. Nuclear Sunrise. We're going to apply this to the skulls in the centre. Now, I probably could have airbrushed this down the centre. It would mean a nice thin line down the middle which hits that yellow and blends. But again, the flame reacts differently based on how hot it is, the material it's around. At the end of the day, it's a giant fucking devil dude with a sword with a demon soul imbued in it. realistic fire isn't really the be-all and end-all of this model. We just want it to draw the eye and be clear that it is something special for this character. And we do that in a really nice, easy way that I can show you guys how to do with as few paints as possible and with minimal effort, minor skill. And again, smashing those misconceptions that all these details are dead hard, you've got to refine them over a lifetime, you've got to use 10 different paintbrushes to achieve it. You fucking don't. Like, go and have a good time with it. Use as few paints as possible. It's not hard to get these effects looking good with minimal effort and detail. Black-brown, I'm sponging this onto the centre of the sword to simulate those scorched skulls. Check out the box art for Angron and you'll see the skulls on the centre of the blade are kind of like burnt and scorched. I went with black-brown for this because I thought black would be too stark a jump. You could probably darken this down with a little bit more black just to make it that little bit darker, but I think black-brown's fine. Again, it gives that element of scorched skulls inside this flaming sword. Grr, angry, smash, blood for the blood god and all that nonsense. Blood letter glaze, rest in peace, gone but never forgotten. One like is the equivalent to one prayer. So I realised this yellow was a little bit too cold, it wasn't warm enough, so I applied a little bit of blood letter glaze just to add a little bit of warmth to it. It did exactly what I wanted it to and looks great. I did a couple of thin built up layers and glazes of this to get it where I wanted it to be. If you don't have blood letter glaze because it's discontinued, something like Baal red or Blood Angels red, and just thin it down to the umpteenth layer. You want it to look like dirty water basically. Because the second you put too much pigment into that, it just turns red or pink, and you don't want that. You want to add a hue to make it a little bit warmer. So as you can see, bloodlet is great for that. Why they got rid of it, to introduce contrast business in it. But you can do just the same with any contrast red you've got, just thinned down, turned into a glaze. And again, it just changes the whole tone of that and makes it look a lot warmer than it did before. Evermatic blue. This is for our verdigris on our armour. So I've got some on my palette. I thin it down about 3:1. You could probably thin it down more and build up the effect, but again, we're on a time scale here. I've got to get this guy in the post for a client's event. So thin it down 3:1, 3 parts water to 1 part Ethermatic. It's not Ethermatic blue, what's it called? Plasmatic glow. Contrast equivalent is Ethermatic blue, which is equally fantastic. But I really like this paint because it's in a dropper bottle, so it's a lot easier to apply to a palette. So I'm just going to apply this to some of the key points on the brass armour. I want to build it up around the shoulder pad, the axe, his other shoulder pad, knee pads, those points of interest with the most sculpted detail where muck and moisture will settle and turn to verdigris and oxidize and all that good stuff. I wouldn't do this all over because you'll lose a lot of your metallic effect. It'll turn the whole thing into like a dull blue, which, don't get me wrong, if you want a highly weathered brass armour you can do. But for me purposely, I wanted to have it just on a few select areas. You'll see it on the box art, it's on the shoulder pad, it's on the weapons, and I wanted to emulate that. It's just nice and easy to do, and it's a really nice quick effect to get some nice verdigris on those brass panels. It's like all things when it comes to weathering effects, gore effects, kind of like those ancillary details outside of the model. Less is always more. It's far easier to add more than it is to take them away once they're dry and have to redo all that effort you put in up to now. So once we've done this bit, we're going to move on to an element of this army that is overplayed by many, and there's far simpler, easier ways to achieve a decent, realistic gore effect, and that is using Flesh Tearers Red. Blood for the blood god can get in the bin, get yourself some case foam, get it loaded up with Flesh Tearers Red, take most of it off, and then all we're going to do is apply this gently in dabs to our weapon. It gives a much more realistic finish, it dries semi-matte instead of thick globules of glossy, rich blood. Again, we're going into the nitpicking and bastards of the hobby now. Less is more. I got to this point, I thought it's okay, I'll apply a little bit more, I'll apply some here, I'll take some more in my finger. It also means then it stretches a little bit and looks like it's pulled and built up. That's all you need to do for blood effect. Do not do any more than that and ruin it. And there we are, guys, Angron is done. So like I say, this was done quickly for the purposes of getting it done for a client for an event. The finish I feel is fantastic for the time spent, which is around between 6 to 8 hours. You could go back in and apply some additional highlights here and there, things like on his wing membranes. If you want to up the skin and the ridges and bits like that, the sharper details you can do. But for the result we get, for the time you've spent and the finish quality overall and the techniques used, it looks great. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, cringy social media nonsense. Check me out on Facebook and Instagram if you need any help or guidance, have any questions. If I can help, I absolutely would love to. My Patreon is patreon.com/theunrelenting brush, £3 a month for a swathe of hobby goodness and giveaways. And if you'd like to hire me to paint any of your stuff, or get Team Unrelenting to paint any of your stuff, there's, 8 of us now? Drop us a message if we can, we'd love to. Nothing but love. Peace!